Soledad O'Brien reports. Don't fail me. CNN Sunday night, May 15th, 8 Eastern.
The team that took out Osama bin Laden is an elite military unit operating under the CIA. It was a clean, fast operation, no U.S. casualties, and this unique unit of high-end warriors stems directly from the original Special Operations Unit called SEAL Team 6. The man who created that team joins us now. Dick Marcinko, it is great to talk to you.
Yeah, good to be here on a day like this.
They tasked you with creating this SEAL Team 6. I love the reason you chose 6, not because there were 6 units, but because you wanted people to think there were enemies to think that.
Well, you know, we still playing the Iron Curtain world, so I thought about those things.
You got to handpick the people in this unit. How did you do it? What did you look for? What do they look for now?
Well, the initial and the most important thing to me at that time, which is early 1980. Was combat experience. We were just getting rid of retirement of our Vietnam veterans. So what I first needed was those that had been to combat and those that had been shot at and knew what a bullet going by their ear with their name on it was about. The second thing that I looked at was trade skills, because we were going to be counter-terrorists. We were going to do hostage situations. So I wanted to have people that knew how to be electricians, knew how to do air conditioning, so at a hostage situation, I could infiltrate my people to repair something and could see the terrorists and do the count for me. What kind of weapons, what was their state of mind, how many hostages, how was it going, versus counting on somebody that didn't know anything about the operations that were going to unfold as soon as I got the green light.
Now, I know that it's sort of moved on, and I'm not sure how much you can tell us about how that has changed, but from SEAL Team 6, I believe you then developed something that they call the Red Cell, and it has continued sort of progressing and changing, adapting to the type of enemy and warfare we face. What's going on now? How do they create these teams now?
Well, they still do it basically the same way. To go to the development group, which is the new name or the current name for SEAL Team 6, they still draw their men from the other SEAL teams. And what really helps out there is, it's an all-volunteer force. They have to go to volunteer for SEAL training or BUDS. Only 23 to 27% make it through BUDS. Then they operate in a normal team for 2, 3, 4 years and apply to go to Dev Group or SEAL Team 6, as I knew it.
Yeah.
And they go through a green team, which is a screening process, and they can have as high as a 50% loss or cut on the applicants there. So you really have the final filter factor, and frankly, all the SEAL teams today, and in fact all special warfare in all the services, are deployed and experienced. The SEAL Dev Group right now is at 13 to 17 deployments between Iraq and Iran. So you're talking about a mature fighter that's been around, highly trained, and with the best equipment in the world.
They aren't operating under the military. They're operating under Title 50, which I understand is then the CIA or other government agencies. What's the difference? Why do they need to operate under whatever other government agency, and how does that change the rules of engagement or warfare?
I think on the rules of engagement, it doesn't really change it in that each specific mission, they write a set of rules of engagement. The advantage of doing under Title 50 and being a mixed joint task force in the form of other than government, you don't have to worry about overflight rights. You don't worry about.
You're not official. You're not as official, so you get
that's
to.
That's right. You are not representing a nation against nation. You're a warrior that's doing a job that's assigned to him. So we don't have to. It's a formality more than a practicality, I think.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me in.
All right, coming up on the top 10 list of conspiracy theories, here's a new one. Bin Laden is still alive. We will bring in our favorite psychiatrist to take on this craziness next.
There's absolutely no doubt about it. I'm not talking about the death of bin Laden, but the fact that some people are never going to believe it. With no body, no picture, and no gravesite, conspiracy theories are on the rise around the world. But why? And who are the people so prone to believing there's a plot behind this story? That's what I want to ask my guest, Dr. Gail Saltz. She's a psychiatrist, author, all-around rational person. Gail, thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure.
So, look, are there two groups of doubters? The rational doubters who say, show us more evidence, and the irrational doubters who, no matter what you show them, will always see a conspiracy?
I would say, given the fact that right now, if bin Laden were alive and showed himself, nothing would be more humiliating to the United States. There's not a logical reason to doubt. So therefore, I think we're talking about people who either have a streak of great paranoia, who are always going to think there's some sort of conspiracy, some suspicion, and people who are doubters by human nature, in other words, obsessional kind of people who need 100% proof, which, by the way, a picture or a video would not be.
Right. I mean, well, a picture 100 years ago when the technology was new, perhaps, but not today.
Of course,
we all know Photoshop and everything else.
Absolutely not suffice. And I think that the reason is that the doubting is a defense mechanism. It is a way to say many things. Some of the things are, these people are not like me, therefore I don't identify with them.
These people being?
Well, it could be, we don't think Obama's correct because he's not like me. So that might be an American. It might be people in Pakistan saying those Americans are not like me. So I don't think they can be correct. I don't identify with them. And therefore, I don't believe it.
So that's the fascinating notion of a defense mechanism that lets folks in Pakistan who are sympathetic to Osama bin Laden, to al-Qaeda, don't want to admit that their ideology has just taken this hit. Somehow they will pretend it's not a reality.
Correct, and I think that there's an implication, which may be or maybe not real, that they let us down, or they failed their job by having him be in their midst, and that we therefore came in and did the job better. And that's a very unacceptable and distressing thought. Right. So you have to defend against that as well.
Well, you're making a subtle distinction. Those who were supposed to, perhaps the Pakistan intelligence agencies that were supposed to have discovered him, they clearly failed. Well, my view is they're complicit.
Yes, but the Pakistani people, they own that, right? That's their intelligence, their government, their military was down the road. Right. So there's a feeling of, I mean, we would feel that way as well. Sure. Oh, we're Americans, we didn't make the cut, but you came in and invaded and took him?
Now, is there any rational demonstration of evidence that could persuade the crazies? Or are they simply beyond the pale? They believe that the UFOs come down every night. They think we really never went to the moon.
I think there's a big difference between UFOs are coming down at night and doubting something that has bigger kernels of potential truth. In other words, a man that's been hiding for 10 years. Why did it take us so long? Why could he be in their midst? I don't think this is as far out as, boy, you're really crazy. However, I do think, you know, paranoia always comes out of seeds and kernels of truth. There's always a kernel of truth to the paranoid.
Is that the old cartoon, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you, right? Which is one of the great cartoons. And so what you're saying is that kernel justifies for them their rational world.
Absolutely. And you can see that in people who have really elaborate paranoid fantasies, or people who, some people are going to look and say, this isn't so elaborate, right? Other people have said, oh, we got him. Oh, he must be dead by now. I mean, how could it take us so long? All of these things add to that feeling of it's rational that there's a conspiracy. But I am saying that I think the doubters, and they're really a minority, if we think about it, nothing will prove to them, nothing is going to prove to them that this is true.
So I take it from all of this that you agree with the president that releasing the photos would have been a vain act in terms of being persuasive, in terms of argument, could have had downside risk in terms of acts of violence, retribution, therefore not releasing was the wiser approach.
Absolutely. I don't think that any of these photos would have made a hill of beans difference to convincing those people. I do believe that it could absolutely ignite people. And let me also say, for the next generation, for the children of our country, I think it would have created tremendous, you know, we're not thinking about the greater victims here, the people who are really suffering and are going to be made anxious, and I think this would only increase that.
Real quick, I want to switch gears, but very quickly. We now have a treasure trove of information about al-Qaeda, all the stuff we took out of that compound. Those who are still members of al-Qaeda, do they now live in absolute fear? Does that paranoia for them force them to act differently?
Well, once there's a reality, absolutely. On the other hand, let me say that a lot of people knew they were being hunted anyway, and there's a denial of that, a feeling of no matter what, I'm immortal, I will be able to overcome that, and that's how they keep functioning. So it depends on that individual psyche, how much he lets the fear break through because of the reality that we did catch one, or how much he really goes into denial mode again and says, you know what, I'm smarter than that. I'm better than that. I'm going to win.
Okay, fascinating stuff, Gail Saltz. Thank you so much for being here. Coming up, if someone moves into your neighborhood, builds giant privacy walls, and never comes out, aren't you curious? Not if you live in Abbottabad. We'll try to peek over the wall, coming up next. Here's a question that's been bugging me. Didn't Osama have any neighbors? And didn't they know who he was? That's basically what I asked Imran Khan. Imran is a national hero in Pakistan for his stardom on the cricket field. And now he's a prominent politician who lives near Osama's old neighborhood. Mr. Khan, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
Does it strike you as absolutely impossible, given the size of this house, given the cost of this house and the walls surrounding it? Isn't it almost impossible that people didn't have curiosity about who lived there?
You know, in the cities, anyone could live anywhere.
Well,
I mean, if he was hiding very well, or if he was moving from place to place, God alone knows. Frankly, I have no idea.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. Where I come from, and we're a nation of 300 million people, a lot of big cities, somebody builds a house that big, puts up a wall that big, everybody knows who's behind it. People gossip. They're curious. You can't keep secrets. I don't care who you are or how much money you have. It is absolutely impossible for me to believe that everybody in that town didn't know who was there.
No, I'm afraid this is not true. I mean, in Pakistan, our population, we have the highest population growth rate. The one thing that is happening is new areas coming up, buildings growing. Where I live in outside Islamabad, every day there are new houses coming up. God alone knows who lives in which houses. I don't know who lives in the neighboring houses. They're all coming up.
All right, Mr. Khan, it is always a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, maybe everybody didn't know, but it certainly isn't possible to me that their security and intelligence agencies didn't know. The whole thing is crazy. Anyway, coming up, America's use of torture, the release of the photo of bin Laden's corpse, uproar around the world, but also arguments backstage in the Obama administration when we come back. Two hot-button issues have been dominating the political chatter in Washington all day, and in fact, also this TV show tonight. They are, should the president have released those photos of bin Laden, and did torture, enhanced interrogation, they call it to be polite, lead to the discovery of bin Laden? We go now to Gloria Borger, the most connected political reporter in Washington, who's been checking all her sources behind the big walls of the White House. Gloria, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
So what have you heard? Let's start with the photos. And it seemed as though here's one where the White House wasn't speaking with one voice. A little odd for this White House.
It's kind of interesting. According to my sources inside the administration, there was always a sense that the president himself was really leaning towards not releasing these photographs. And the most interesting piece of information I got was that this was always going to be a decision that he made in concert with his national security team, in particular his Secretary of Defense and his Secretary of State. And as a Republican said to me, who served in a previous administration, he said, you know what? When your Secretary of Defense says to you, do not release these photographs because it could put our men and women at risk, it's the right decision not to release the photographs. And a senior administration official told me last night, he said, look, there's no doubt Osama bin Laden is dead. We've got the DNA, he said, we've got the facials, we've got the wife's identification, we've got his measurements. So if this is for some shock value, why would we do it? The doubters are never going to believe it one way or another.
Here's what's fascinating. You are right. For a Secretary of Defense, the Trump argument, the one that is going to supersede all others, is it's going to put our men and women in the field at risk.
That's right.
Very hard ever to say no when that argument is made. But here's the curious thing. The person who was disagreeing with that is the current head of the CIA, who's about to become the Secretary of Defense. Leon Panetta seemed to kind of get out there and say, yeah, of course it's going to become public. Why not just do it now? That seemed a little dissonant to me.
Right. And I think that the key word in listening very carefully, and of course in all these situations, as you know, Elliot, you have to parse words here, that is, it's ultimately going to be released, right? So I don't think this precludes the possibility that somewhere down the road, as part of the historical record, that this picture or pictures is indeed going to be released. But at this particular moment, I think the sense inside the White House was that it would inflame an already inflamed situation, and there really isn't any need to do it now because they've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that Osama bin Laden is in fact dead.
Gloria, let's switch topics for a moment.
Okay.
It seems as though two different narratives of the history are being written. One to justify and rationalize the use of waterboarding, enhanced interrogation,
right,
saying we wouldn't have found him if we hadn't done that. The other line of argument, the history being written, is, come on, guys, that had nothing to do with our finding out where he was. Which of these is a better history? Which is more persuasive to you?
Well, the more persuasive argument, first of all, I think, let me state that it's ultimately something we cannot prove because we don't have access to all the documents, so we don't know exactly who was tortured when. Here is what I know from my sources who are very familiar with this operation. What I know is that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was waterboarded 183 times, when asked about the important courier who ultimately led the CIA to Osama bin Laden, when asked about this courier, he lied. KSM absolutely lied. And the reason the lie was alerting to the CIA because they knew from other detainees who had not been waterboarded that, in fact, this courier was a protege of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and other high-level al-Qaeda operatives.
Right.
So it was the lie that led to them, but he didn't tell them the truth. So what does that prove to you about the waterboarding?
You know what, Gloria? I can guarantee you both sides are going to have a good or reasonable argument to justify their view of the history. Anyway, Gloria Borger,
they will.
Thanks so much for being here. And thank you for watching tonight. Good night from New York. Piers Morgan tonight starts right now.